the Pentagon spent money spreading misinformation and disinformation across Asia, claiming that the Sino vaccine, that's the Chinese version of the vaccine, had rat poison in it and pork in it, generating vaccine hesitancy in China and Asia, while they were censoring information in your country and in my country, forbidding people to express concern about vaccines and what a lot of people are now calling. So what is their actual perspective? Also, when you get into this story, it seems that there is already explicitly and literally a kind of state of war between the United States, Russia and China, that they're already declared enemies. Think about all the stories you've heard, like the Russian bots are spreading misinformation, Russian election interference, Donald Trump got all that misinformation, disinformation stuff. Well, our countries are doing that in China while claiming that those countries are doing it here. And I don't think this is just like, oh, you're naive. You know that there are deep state actions and scurrilous activities. Yes, of course, we all know that. But what I'm interested in is the apparent lack of virtue, morality, or principle that runs through every single issue. They'll just tell you anything. Like, have a quick look at this, like the claim that Joe Biden was digitally altered. You've seen the famous image of Joe Biden looking in the wrong direction when there's a paratrooper landing in front of the G7 leaders, right? Well, here's the legacy media saying that these images have been digitally altered. But when you look at the images that they claim are digitally altered next to the images that they claim weren't, they're absolutely identical. So have a look at this. And then for a minute, let's contemplate together what the Pentagon were doing, claiming that vaccines were ineffective in China and Asia, while censoring the claim that vaccines were ineffective in these territories. Is it possible that in their attempt to spread misinformation abroad, they were telling the truth more in the Philippines and across Asia than they were to the populations that they're supposed to be serving? First of all, let's look at Joe Biden at the G7 and try and spot any bloody difference at all between what they're claiming is cheap fake. It's a new phrase now. Try deep fakes. It's time for cheap fakes. And the footage that they're claiming is not all. Have a look, this is ridiculous.
Cheap fake clips went viral on social media and were picked up by some news outlets. Take a look at this clip, for example. It shows Biden and other world leaders watching a skydiving demonstration before the president is seen walking away and looking in another direction. Outlets claimed that he was sort of just aimlessly wandering away. The clip amassed millions of views within just a few hours, when actually if you widen out, you can see that he was talking to one of the members of the military that was participating in that demonstration.
How are they claiming that that's misinformation? How are they claiming that's digitally altered? Digitally altered to what end? The footage looked identical in both instances. As Glenn Greenwald pointed out, with the issue of cognitive decline and senility, they can't claim that we've been subject to hoaxes and misinformation and malinformation, because all of us are to some degree familiar, because we live in the world and we have elderly relatives and we have personal experience and heartbreak of watching loved ones enter into senility. So it's not something that we're not experienced with. It's stupid to make that claim. Okay, let's have a look at Greenwald's post. Look, the major problem Democrats have with respect to Biden's cognitive impairment is people can see it for themselves. Yeah, you can't. Who are you going to believe? Us or your own lying eyes? Unlike other issues where people may think they lack the expertise to decide, most Americans have the experience of watching an elderly loved one decline. They're trying, I think, to create a state of bewilderment where you don't know what to believe. I saw Barack Obama once, did you see it, address an audience at the prestigious Stanford University. Stanford University, by the way, where Jay Bhattacharya practices science. Jay Bhattacharya, who they attacked and censored, ridiculed and undermined when he said, lockdowns ain't the way to get through a pandemic, you know. You might want to be careful about these vaccines. Don't believe everything you read. You should probably shield the most vulnerable and consider the possible impact of lockdowns on cancer patients, heart patients. That guy was shut down. Well, at Stanford University, Barack Obama claimed that the categories of misinformation and malinformation are dangerous, not just because, and this is an attempt to get past the idea that's bloody obvious to anyone, i.e., just give me the information, I'll decide what I believe for myself. I'll look at Joe Biden and I'll decide whether or not I think he's senile. Yeah, he's wandering around, poor old bastard. Park him, will ya, on a chaise lounge. The poor bastard's knackered. I can see that for myself. Barack Obama tried to help us over that hump the same way he guys Joe Biden off a stage by saying, even if you don't believe the information yourself, it muddies the waters. It creates a murky environment.
You just have to flood a country's public square with enough raw sewage.
What then were the Pentagon doing when they were spreading this information across Asia, saying that the Chinese vaccine had rat poison in it and other weird racist stuff? And remember, at the time, you couldn't call it the Chinese virus, even if you were president of the United States, because that was considered virus. So what is their moral position? What is their position on vaccines? What is their position on misinformation? Let's get into it. An investigative report published by Reuters, who usually I wouldn't trust because I know that they are part of a set of media interests that are usually coordinated and collaborative when it comes to ensuring that stories that smear dissenters, for example, come out at the same time, never argue with one another, all sing from the same hymn sheet. But nevertheless, this is a Reuters thing, so that's another element you're going to have to consider here. Revealed that the Pentagon conducted a secret anti-vaccine campaign during the first 2 years of COVID as part of a massive psychological warfare operation against China, targeting the Philippines in particular. The information spread by the US military at the peak of the pandemic contributed to keeping the country's vaccination rate the lowest in Asia. So over there, they wanted there to be a low vaccination rate, where over here... Thank you for joining us for this message from our partners. You know that ibuprofen is ineffective and dangerous. You probably take it still, don't you? I do from time to time. It's especially dangerous for seniors and probably dogs. Be quiet. It causes blood clots, strokes, kidney failure. Ibuprofen ain't a solution. It's like many big pharma remedies. It actually just masks the true problem, inflammation. It deals with the symptom or masks it, but doesn't get rid of the problem. Researchers suggest adding an Antarctic super nutrient to your diet, omega-3 fatty acids. You've heard that phrase before. Omega-3 from krill oil. That's what whales eat, baby. And if you ever met an unhealthy whale, maybe Willy or that one on Blackfish that kept killing everyone. But other than that, they're straight. And they eat krill oil, which has been shown to support healthy blood pressure, circulation, brain health, reduce inflammation, swelling, and joint pain. Go to getnativepath.com/brand to see your special offer for being a Russell Brand listener and community member. Cause krill oil can outperform pharma painkillers without the dangerous side effects. Now, for a limited time, you can grab Native Path Antarctic krill oil for as low as $23. So go to getnativepath.com/brand now to get your special offer for being part of Russell Brand's audience and community. I'm Russell Brand, my audience and community. Click the link below this video, guys, and you can get some of this krill oil. I've been trying the stuff myself, and by God, the joints, the jujitsu, everything's improving. Let's get back to the content. In early 2020, at the beginning, the Pentagon deployed part of its machinery in order to create a crusade of fear-mongering and racist attacks against China. So again, remember all the times they've said that it's racist to criticize China, they were doing that. And perhaps, I would say somewhat more insidiously, in territories close to China and possibly China itself. The campaign targeted Sinovac, the Chinese company manufacturing an anti-COVID vaccine that was the first vaccine available in the Philippines. One senior military officer involved in the program bluntly told Reuters, "We weren't looking at this from a public health perspective. We were looking at how we could drag China through the mud." So who do we trust and what do we trust? Remember, at that time, there was doubt about American involvement in the Wuhan Institute of Virology's funding. There was confusion about whether or not it was a proximal origin or whether it was a natural origin or if it had been leaked out of a vaccine. And people went to incredible lengths, institutions went to an incredible length, by people I mean Anthony Fauci, to ensure that only one narrative was available to you. Meanwhile, across the water in China, with whom they had financial and scientific scientific relationships, they are simultaneously spreading this information. What's their actual moral position? You've heard, right, about the Pied Piper strategy where Democrats back Republican candidates in order to create a warped impression. If we financially back this candidate in a primary, then that candidate is likely to be elected to be the candidate that stands, and this will create a false and bogus impression of the Republicans as more extreme or more whatever. Well, isn't it odd to realise that there is no moral principle behind any of this activity? That was meant to be a global effort. We were meant to be, weren't we, fighting a global pandemic together. All of us in the world now are in the same position. Doesn't matter if you're young or old or black or white or rich or poor or whatever. Life is sacred and we must all do whatever we can in order to protect the sanctity of human life. And if that means stay in your home, wear a mask, stand 6 feet apart and take this vaccine, then we all better get on and do it. Well, now we've discovered that 6 feet apart was made up, that masks didn't work, that the vaccines caused incredible side effects, that there's a reckoning around excess deaths, and that there were international misinformation campaigns taking place in order to create disruption in other territories, perhaps because we're much further along into a global conflict, potentially with Russia. Look at what's going on in Ukraine, but also maybe in China. Look at some of this stuff, as well as the military bases that encircle China. Makes me realize this. You absolutely cannot trust them, no matter what, on anything. Various anointed figures are put in positions of power, and above all else, the will of the population has to be nullified, ignored, baffled, and confused. And I think this is part of the confusion part of that strategy. Confuse people across the Philippines and domestically create bewilderment. Hundreds of troll accounts and online bots operated by the US military attacked the vaccine in Tagalog, that I guess is their native language, or one of them, and others. They said that the vaccine was rat poison. It was part of a Chinese plot to take over the Philippines. It contained pork gelatin. I mean, this is all so weird and so World War I, dropping flyers. Hitler's got one nut, you know. You got to watch out for the Kaiser. We're still using the same kind of mentality, the same sort of almost Neanderthal mentality, just with extraordinary technology and also the ability to annihilate entire populations through weaponry. The Pentagon trolls manufactured crude racist imagery, attacked Chinese manufactured and donated face masks and COVID test kits. It's baffling. The US Department also acknowledged the accuracy of the Reuters investigation, in itself alarming, but claimed that its anti-vax campaign was a response compelled by China's disinformation campaign to falsely blame the United States for the spread of COVID-19. They started it. Well, they started the misinformation war. They were doing election interference. Is it false to blame them now that we know that the EcoHealth Alliance were operating out of the Wuhan Institute of Virology, that Fauci personally knew that American taxpayer dollars were being spent in that literal laboratory? The people of the Philippines already had a low level of trust for vaccines. Check out this part of it. They botched a 2016 rollout of a French vaccine for dengue fever, Dengvaxia, that placed about 10% of 800,000 vaccinated school children at risk of severe infection and led to widespread vaccine skepticism. So over here, if you were to analyze the historic impact of other vaccines and were to scrutinize what this product actually was, gene therapy, if you were to start talking about spike proteins, myocarditis, you were censored. Meanwhile, in the Philippines, where they had legitimate doubt about vaccines, they exacerbated it. What's the moral center? The Pentagon trolls also circulated claims that face masks produced in China were infected with COVID, etc. I mean, bloody hell. According to Reuters, they began using social media tools in 2010 to create a sprawling ecosystem of online propaganda and disinformation. The Pentagon needed approval of embassy officials before conducting psychological operations in our country. There's no morality. There's no moral center. In 2019, prior to either the outbreak of COVID-19 or the war in Ukraine, the then Secretary of Defense signed a secret order that later paved the way for the launch of the US military propaganda campaign. The order elevated the Pentagon's competition with China and Russia to the priority of active combat. So I'm not suggesting that that means we are literally at war with Russia, although the fact that there are American troops, American deep state, American involvement in the 2014 coup, ongoing NATO infringement of formerly protected territories, the membership of NATO of countries that were promised would never join it, the use of American weaponry during that war on Russian territory, British secret intelligence being involved in that mission to blow up that bridge in Crimea, the bloody Nord Stream pipeline blowing up. It sort of seems like a war, doesn't it? It's sort of a war, isn't it? Also, what's going on in China? Whatever's going on between Russia and China and the United States of America, it ain't what we're being told. And whatever we're told almost about any subject has to be scrutinized and analyzed, knowing that misinformation doesn't come from, except perhaps by chance and accident, streams like Rumble and contributors like me. The terrifying misinformation comes from authoritative, taxpayer-funded forces and sources. That's what you have to be concerned about. That's what you've always had to be concerned about. They are doing the very things they're trying to claim they're protecting you from and censor you for doing. So where do we go but God from here? Where do we go? Because it seems to me that they got this thing so wrapped up. I know those of you that believe in Trump will say, no, Trump is the wrecking ball. He's going to go in there and he's going to mess that stuff up. And I pray you're right about that. And those of you that believe in Bobby Kennedy, you'll say, no, in him we have an authentic voice. And I pray you're right about that. My deep concern and the origin of my prayer is that we need something a lot more powerful than human power as practiced in these current corrupt systems to get the change that we radically require. But that's just what I think. Why don't you let me know what you think in the comments and chat?
Hey, this is exciting. We've got a great partner today. It's Rumble. But beyond Rumble, it's Rumble's latest venture. Let me ask you first, are you a Sleepy Joe type character with zero cognitive performance, struggling to muster focus and brain power for basic things like running the United States of America? You've got to stop drinking woke liberal coffee that hates you and your way of life and start your day by drinking Rumble's very own 1775 coffee. This is going to be the best tasting coffee you've ever had. Seriously good, ethically sourced from a family farm in the high altitude mountains of Bolivia. Not in the Bolivian lowlands, run not by a family but by a single man still living with a pet. No! Instead of waking up and drinking your big corporation-owned woke ideology coffee that's probably making you sick from the pesticides it's sprayed with, try Rumble's 1775 revolutionary coffee. Support freedom of speech. Build a parallel economy that actually values you and loves you. My favourite? It's dark, of course. I've always found the lure of the dark irresistible. I'm sorry, how can I stay mad at you? You're just going to have to wait over there for a little while. Level up your morning routine with a 1775 coffee. Sleep all night knowing your hard-earned dollary dues are going towards supporting freedom-loving creators like me on Rumble. Visit 1775coffee.com now, pick up your first bag, use the code BRAND to save 10% on your first order. Oh, come on. Why choose, you know?
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.